Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Mayowa Adeoshun. I'm the founder CEO of Acetrica. And Acetrica is essentially a solution that works with developers and capital institutions that are deploying finance into projects, real estate projects. We largely work on governance, infrastructure, and reporting. So we make it so that developers have institutional ready projects to be able to access capital. And I have a large experience working at the intersection of finance, risk, and technology, and working very closely with SMEs as well in my former startup. So I'm glad to be here, and I'll be speaking mostly about how SMEs can take advantage and structure their businesses to position themselves to grow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayowa. It's nice to have you on board today. So we're going to be saying, Miss Doyin, please, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, okay. So it's a pleasure to be here. Hopefully everyone can hear me. My name is Doyin Abiola Tobon. I'm the founder CEO of ARC. We're a business operations technology platform built for small and medium enterprises. So we basically deal with the data for the businesses, making sure that businesses are run and structured and making it easier for them to access capital for growth. I have sat on the three sides of this conversation. I have an existing construction business that's 17 years old, and that business grew from a small business to being a medium-sized business. Also, I used to be a banker as well, so I do understand the role at the intersection of technology, accessing capital, and growing businesses. So that's what I'm going to be speaking to, the importance of data during the course of this conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Doyin. It's nice to have you on board today. I'm going to Mr. Dami. Please, can you please introduce yourself?
All right, can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dami Dovola, and I am an investment banking operative, and I have over 6 years experience working with SMEs and sometimes big organizations in helping them understand structure and improve their finances. And I plan on bringing all of that experience into this conversation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dami. Mr. Eyitayo, please, can you introduce yourself?
Hey, Esther, good to see you again.
Hi, good to see you, Mr. Eyitayo.
Good to see you. I'm excited about this. Itayo is my name.
It's
I'm a
always
tech
nice to have you
entrepreneur.
on board.
I'm excited. Good to see all these amazing speakers. I help Africans move into global jobs. That's what I do, primarily from helping Africans to learn technology skills to helping companies in the global north hire talent in the global south. Excited about this. Right. Over to you, Esther.
Nice to have you on board, Mr. Eyitayo. So, Mr. Mayowa, you've introduced yourself. Mr. Damilare, you've introduced yourself. Mr. Ekundayo, please, can you briefly introduce yourself? And can you please put on your video so we can see you while you're introducing yourself, Mr. Ekundayo? Mr. Ekundayo, can you hear us? So if we can't get him on board, maybe he'll come on later. We're just going to go into the topic of the day: funding, budgeting, investing, and funding for SMEs. And so each speaker has 10 minutes to just give us a brief, share their screen, what they have for the audience today. So I'm going to be starting from Ms. Doyin. The floor is yours, Ms. Doyin.
Great. Okay. So I'm sending a request to share my screen.
Okay,
Please accept the request.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So yes, so as I said, I'm going to be speaking to the importance of data here. I know that when we're speaking about small and medium enterprises, obviously the nature of our conversation here has to do with planning, basically how you're going to be allocating your funding, how you source for funding, whether it's from an equity side or from a debt side. But the main crux of my conversation here is going to be with regards to the importance of data. I think we speak a lot about how difficult it is for small and medium enterprises to access capital, but there's a reason behind that. That just doesn't happen in a vacuum. So clearly, we all know about how important small and medium enterprises are to this economy. About 97% of all of our businesses fall under that category. But sadly, only 5% of them actually have reports. So from an audited perspective, it's very difficult for external parties, even internally, for the businesses to really understand what's happening, how healthy their business is, what the financial requirements for the business is, and how to put the necessary plans in place. So as we all know, there's quite a lot of data that exists. If you sell products, I'm sure you would have a sense of what number of products you have, what prices those products are being sold at, what prices you bought them at. You'll have a sense of, who has bought, the volumes that have been sold. You'd have a sense of what you're procuring. But all this information is usually held in a way that is quite haphazard and quite scattered. So it makes it very difficult for you to then go about, actually planning for your business effectively, and then trying to interact with third-party stakeholders. Either you're trying to raise an equity stake from them for them to become shareholders in your business, or you're speaking to a lender. So it's not a fact that information is not being captured, but there's no clear holistic picture for most of the SMEs, right? So if you're trying to plan, if you're trying to say, these are the resources that we have available to us within our business, and how are we going to allocate those resources, what then tends to happen is that this is now treated as a snapshot type of activity once a year, and in some cases periodically. But there are more, useful ways of doing this from an interactive perspective, and that's where technology comes in. And I know that sometimes it might seem scary, it might seem as though you need to be a large enterprise in order to take advantage of these platforms. But increasingly, there are a lot of platforms that have been built for businesses to enable them run as smoothly as possible, and to be able to gather all of the necessary information in order to make the right choices for your business. So instead of having to wait until you start having challenges, or making choices based off of your feelings, or even historical, practice, or what has happened previously. I mean, as we can imagine, like even in Nigeria, the reality of 2024 is vastly different from 2026. So we do need to get to a place whereby we start looking at the SME space in the context of how the world actually works, and also moving away from a lot of manual practices that make that quite challenging. So basically, once you don't have the right data, if you're not able to capture that data, capturing it is actually step one, actually, but even also able to present it in a way that is coherent, then you start running into issues where it seems as though your business is being presented as too risky, or a business that cannot be backed. And the truth of the matter is that whether you're dealing with an investor, or whether you're actually dealing with a lender, or even internally within your business, when you're trying to make the right choices as to what it is that you should do, whether you should pivot, what products you should focus on, whether you should, try to integrate new services, whether you should work with a different provider, it's usually best when you ground those kinds of choices, and when you start thinking of your business in a structural manner, and you base that off of data. So the reality is, we need to kind of move beyond where we are right now, where it appears that you need to have, access to very highly skilled professionals in order to basically structure your business properly. In this day and age, we do have digital platforms that are quite accessible. And when we're having these types of conversations, because I think it's something that we talk about all the time, whether you're having this on a news platform, whether you're having it on conferences, there's constantly this focus on the challenges that SMEs face when it comes to whether they're trying to draw up, their plans for their business, whether they're trying to raise financing. But it just is a situation of what is clear, what are you presenting, and how are you presenting it, right? If you start thinking of your business in a way whereby you understand that the numbers in your business goes beyond the amount of money that you are actually making, but you need to start having a clear sense of how profitable is this business, how is this business going to be able to adjust to shocks? When you're presenting that to third parties and even internally, when you're going to try and make the right choices for your business, it's always best if this is grounded in data. So that's basically the perspective that I will be coming with. I like to think proactively and not continue speaking about what the problem is, but we need to move away. We acknowledge that there is an issue, but how can we solve this and what can we do? So I'm really big on trying to empower the small and medium enterprises instead of presenting them as, people who are helpless and, and there's really no chance of us being able to create the change that's required. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Ms. Doyin.
You're welcome.
It's good to know that SMEs already have the problem. The problem is already there. So thank you for making us to know that we have to know the solutions, what they really need to do to get out of that problem. Thank you for that. So I think we have Mr. Ekundayo online. So Mr. Ekundayo, we lost you before. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry.
Okay, so can you briefly introduce yourself? We called on you before, you were nowhere to the phone.
Okay. Sorry, my internet logged me out. Thank you for having me on the call. So primarily, I run a few businesses. I've got a fintech, and we've grown the fintech to own a microfinance bank. So we do a bit of lending here and there. And then my team sat on the disbursement of a national loan at the time. During COVID, the entire loan for the federal government, we worked with them to ensure that happened. And then we still do cash transfers and some other things. So I will just generally speak across preparedness, what do people need, alternative funding, and how to bootstrap if you're not even finding the fund.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ekundayo. So we'll come back to you. Mr. Eitayo, the floor is yours for 10 minutes. Kindly run off through what you have for us today.
Hey, I see so many of my guys on the call. Ekundayo, good to see you. Maya, good to see you. Dewey, good to see you. Lami, good to see you guys. Celebrate you guys. I'm just going to do this because I don't know how to keep the time. It's my biggest weakness. I'm going to run through this quickly. But when you want me to stop, please just get me to stop. Please just get me to stop.
All right, no problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Again, Eitayo is my name. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 10 years. This is my third startup. Moved from tech education to real estate slightly, from real estate now back into tech education, workforce development, and global hiring. The knowledge that I want to share is just going to be practically the things that I've learned, running a startup, making very, very interesting, sometimes very horrible mistakes, that cost me a lot of money, lots of relationship, and every other thing you can think about. And it's like everything rises and falls on funding. It's like money is like the heart of everything, So I'm very excited that we're talking about this subject. I'm trying to share my screen, so please confirm when. Let's see. Can you see my screen now? Is it up? Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, let me do this for another one. I think my screen is up now. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Ah, okay, that's strange. Let me try again. How about now?
Okay, we can see it now, yes.
Great. So I'm going to run through these in just 5 to 7 minutes. And for me, what I want to really just talk about is what are the critical lessons that entrepreneurs that are building, startups must know. I want to exit this mode and then reshare in a much more full screen. Good. Now, for me, the first critical lesson is that most SMEs that I've interacted with don't die because of bad products. In fact, I currently run an ecosystem of over 800 entrepreneurs. We call it the velocity. Every time I see another startup fail, It's always never a problem with products. The first on the list is always, oh, running out of cash, running out of cash. Most entrepreneurs fail, most startups fail because of cash problem, not necessarily because of product problem. Now, what that has taught me in reality is that profit is no longer an option. If you are an entrepreneur, especially in the global south, in Nigeria, in emerging markets, profit is not an option. You have to always think about cash. So you don't want to run out of cash, you don't want to die of cash. Now, because you don't want to die, there are three major things that you must have at the back of your mind. Number one is budgeting. Number two is investing. Number three is funding. For budgeting, it's the way you keep yourself active and staying alive. For investing, that is one of the fastest way you grow. And for funding, that is the funnel or the channel that you build to continue to pour money into your business. And these are the three things that I don't personally joke about. I don't joke with any of these three things, right? Now, when it comes to budgeting, the real problem is most SMEs just live on vibes. They just live on energy. They live on the next opportunity. Most entrepreneurs don't sit down to have a 1-year budget, a 6-month budget, a quarterly budget, a monthly budget, even a weekly budget. And I'm also one of them. I'm an energy god. So most times, I'm pumping money into the next thing that I see. 5 of my employees are doing well, and then I just wake up one morning and say, oh, let's send 2 of them to Qatar. You can't run a company that way. Remember, companies outgrow the entrepreneurs, companies outgrow the owners of the business, and you need to start to get mature. So you don't create a budget to run your business. You create a budget to give the business the life that the business deserves. Esther, I'm getting the background noise from your end. The second thing is, can you mute yourself, Esther, because I'm getting this noise that is coming from your end. Okay, good. So the first mistake that a lot of people make is that they're mixing a lot of money together. Oh, this is my money. They throw it into the business without the right documentation. Then the business makes its money. Then they take the money from the business, then they put it on themselves. What you are doing is that you're literally telling a high school boy to start to pay your feeding fee because you are the parents. You're telling the primary 1-year-old boy that the boy should start to, buy you a car because you give birth to the child. That is not the way to survive as an entrepreneur. You need to allow the business to grow, and you need to allow the business to run its own money itself. And you have to separate yourself from the business such that, the business can grow without you and with its own resources. Now, when it comes to budgeting, these are the 3 major things that I don't negotiate. Number one, separating yourself totally from the business. Because one day you're going to be at the club and then your card is not going to work, and then you're going to have your business, account with you, and you're going to spend money from your business. And when you continue to build that type of attitude, you're killing the business. Because businesses are their entities on their own, their lives, their living being on their own. And they require that they live without you. You can't continue to meddle with, your business's resources. The second thing I see that a lot of people make in terms of mistake that I don't do again is you have to know what your runway is. You can't run a business by continuously praying and fasting and believing that one day, something is going to happen and one miracle is going to happen. I'm a very big believer of miracles too. I believe in miracles, but you have to understand that, again, businesses have the heart and the mind of their own. So you must have, an idea of when are you likely going to die, with the current resources that you have. And I don't joke with that because I've faced business death 3 times. And I faced them because I had hope. I had faith. I was praying and fasting. But I was the one praying and fasting, but the business itself wasn't praying and fasting. So you have to make sure that you have to understand that your prayer doesn't affect your business. You must understand when are you likely going to die based on the cash that is available to you. The third one for me is budgeting for business. Budget for the business you have. So you want to think about what is the worst thing that's going to happen, what is the good thing that's going to happen, and not continuously relying on hope and faith. Now, let me rush to the next thing I want to talk about. I won't spend too much time on these. The number 5 numbers you must always think about. Number one is that how much do you have left in your accounts? If you continue to pay the way you are paying right now, how many months are you going to survive? If you continue to spend money the way you're spending money, how many more months do you have, left? Now, you can't think about the opportunities that are going to come. You have to base that on what you currently have right now. If I continue to spend money the way I spend money, and yesterday I was talking to my accountant. If I, as an entrepreneur right now, the way I'm sitting here, if I continue to spend money the way I spend money without another additional funding coming from outside, I probably would die after 9 months. You must have that number at the back of your mind. You must always think about the number. And other important thing that I talk about, because I only have 10 minutes to run through this. Now, on investing, cash is king. Keep your money. However, you must always continue to spend all the cash, on things that will turn the business around and create future opportunities for you. Because every time people think about investment, people think about, stocks and all those things. No, that's not the only thing we're talking about. Your business must have younger sisters. They must have younger brothers. And what do I mean by younger brothers? All that little moving vehicle within the business that when they also mature, they can also sustain the business. That's one of the ways to think. Most founders will think about new office spaces, nice logos now, nice brands. You see, you must think about what are the things that I'm going to pour into this business today that in the next 5 years, when these things mature, will position the business for better opportunities, maybe more money, more strategic relationship, or maybe even the opportunity to access some future funds, in the future. And that's one of the things to think about. And I'm not going to spend time on this again. Number one is think about this question every time you run your company. The first one is, what are the things I am going to spend on today that when these things mature will likely position us for strategic opportunities or for more money in the future? And finally is funding, because that's the part I am very, very excited about. Please don't let anybody tell you you don't need money to run your company. African entrepreneurs always think that they can bootstrap their way out of poverty. You cannot. Again, I'm going to tell you this. You can't. You can't. It's impossible. You can bootstrap your own way as a personal entrepreneur, as an individual. But wealth is not created that way. You're creating wealth for every single person. Everyone that works with you, you're creating wealth for them. All your partners, you're creating wealth for them. All your investors, you're creating wealth for them. Guess what? The bank that saves your money, that keeps your money for you, your job as an entrepreneur is to create wealth for them. You're not creating wealth for yourself. What I did as an entrepreneur for my first 7 years in business was creating wealth for myself. Well, you will do that. You will create wealth for yourself. You will go the same cycle, right? When you have created wealth for yourself, that same wealth you've created for yourself, you will burn it in bad, horrible systems, because a poor employee, right, will steal from you.
You need to start rounding up.
Okay, I'm going to say this last time. A poor employee will steal from you. A poor partner, will extort you. So your job as an entrepreneur is to always think about investment, not only from, or funding, not only from, I'm raising money for myself, but I'm raising money so that this business can become very big and massive, so that every other person within the network of the business can become wealthy. That is the way to think about funding. Okay, let me stop here and hand over
Thank
back
you
to
so
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aitayo. So I just like the fact that you said we should, and SME should realize that they are not creating wealth for only themselves, they are creating wealth for everybody. And I like the fact that one thing I discovered is SMEs, it's very difficult to differentiate business money from their personal money. And thank you for bringing that into limelight. Thank you so much, Mr. Aitayo. We'll come back to you with questions. So, Mr. Mayowa, the floor is yours for 10 minutes. Mr. Mayowa, are you there? Okay.
Yes, hi, I'm here. So I'm going to have to apologize. I don't have slides. I'm going to just have to speak, sharing experience that I have. I hope that is okay. So I have over 10 years of experience. I mentioned I'm the founder of Acetrica, and I also am a co-founder of Sycamore, right? So I've spent the last 7 years building Sycamore to an institution that what it is today. And it has been a very interesting journey. And so I have been through the journey of an SME. I've been through the challenges, the ups and the downs, and the pain points. So that's what I will be speaking on in this 10 minutes. So I think what is important as an SME, firstly, I think the first presenter mentioned around data and structure. I 100% agree with that. As an SME, first of all, you need to decide what type of business do you want. Are you planning to structure yourself as a lifestyle business, or are you planning to structure yourself as a startup? Now, if you are trying to go as a startup, there are certain things you need to keep in mind. There are certain expectations that you're going to have to meet for your institutional capital. But they are quite different from if you're running an SME. And I think we'll focus on just doing an SME as a lifestyle business. So a lifestyle business essentially is in the name. It's a business that most Nigerians and Africans actually operate, right? We operate lifestyle businesses, and the lifestyle business essentially means it's a business that generates enough revenue for you to fund and finance your lifestyle, right? It's not necessarily going to be a business that scales, regionally, and you have thousands of employees. You may or you may not, but at the core of the business is a business that runs functionally. You're making revenue, you're taking care of your expenses, and you've structured it in a way that it returns dividends or cash back to the owners of the business. Now, if you're an SME and you're looking for funding, maybe you just started, or maybe you've been in business for a couple of months or a year or two, and you want to scale your business. The first thing that you need to understand, and this is, regardless if you're a lifestyle business or you're a startup, you're dealing with a currency called trust, right? And for someone to inject their money into your business, you have to have a very large account of trust, right? So how do you grow that trust? First of all, if you're a founder that has had significant experience in the past doing something similar, maybe you've grown a business in the past, that is a currency that translates into trust. If you're not necessarily someone who has done this in the past, but you're maybe transitioning from employment into a business as an entrepreneur, you can still leverage on your experience, but you're going to have to structure your business very much in a way that it speaks for itself, right? So I think structuring your business where you have separate accounts for your business as to your personal account is one way that you can start to build that trust, because when you present your financials to an investor, which you would have to do, they can see clearly the transactions of the business, and it's not going to have to be explained by, oh, actually I took drawings from the business for this, I did drawings from the business for that. It's a very clean transaction that captures everything the business has done. Then you're going to need to have some strategic hires, right? You're going to hire some people in your business, right? If you're not strong in your finance, you're going to need to have someone who is strong in finance, or at least an accountant. Now, you don't have to hire them full time. You can hire them as what's it called now? Contract, and pay these kind of fractional arrangements where maybe they do a number of hours a week. They work with your books. They do the reconciliation at the end of the month. They do postings and stuff like that. You can outsource that, and it's quite affordable. Maybe you're paying 100 or 200,000, maybe let's say a max 300,000 a month for that service. That gives your books, gives you a clean book, right? Then you might need a lawyer, right? So you need to have a lawyer, make sure that your business is registered under CAC. You could do that yourself, but it's easier to go through a lawyer, because that makes that way they can make sure you're classified on the right categories. And they can also advise you especially if you're doing something that is regulated, right? If your business is in a regulated space, you should have some sort of legal advice to help you navigate that, because the worst thing that you could do is to grow your business for 2-3 years and the regulators come and shut it down, right? All your money will go, your investors' money will go, and that would definitely dilute the trust that you've built. So you need to have a lawyer. Now, if your business is very much buying and selling, then you should also decide, do you want to have a physical location or do you want to have a digital location, right? So you also want to make sure that you have a strong social media presence, right? So that way you can build your brand and your influence online. These are some of the things that you need to start as building blocks, but as an SME, first of all, let me classify an SME. An SME is any business that's doing under 500 million naira per annum, right? So most businesses are classified as SMEs, either 500 million per annum or 200 employees within the company. So that's still that's a medium-sized business. And most businesses don't get to that scale. So a lawyer, an accountant, a social media handler, if you're lucky to have that. But if you don't have the capability to hire all these things, then you're going to have to be the one who has to learn these things as well. So this is what they talk about, financial literacy, but it even goes beyond financial literacy. You need to understand all of the different aspects, all of the moving parts, and work on your business and not necessarily in your business as an SME. I don't know how much time I have left, but your mic is muted.
Oh, you need to start rounding up. You have less than 1 minute left.
Yeah, I will yield the floor for the rest. I'll pause here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayowa. Thank you for bringing us from that perspective. Really understand. So I think SMEs, what they don't understand is they need to have an accountant to run their business. It makes their business more effective. Thank you very much. So I'm going to come to you, Mr. Damilare. The
Hey,
floor is
can you
yours,
hear me?
Mr. Damilare. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Thank you to everyone who's spoken earlier. I've learned an interesting part of this conversation from everyone's conversation. From Mrs. Doni, I learned, the importance of data from Mr. Maiwa, who just spoke recently. I learned, the importance at a level of partnerships. And from Mr. Yitayo, I learned the understanding around, the breakdown of budgeting, investment, and funding generally. And I appreciate the conversation they've had earlier, because I'm going to not repeat what they've said, but build on the foundation that they've laid. To then say that one of the most important things that you can have as a founder is understanding, clarity. There's a passage in the Bible that says that, paraphrasing now, that wisdom and understanding shall be the stability of your times. I think that these are the times that the Bible was talking about. And I'm not preaching religion here, I'm using it as a reference point. We say that the more a person or an organization is able to leverage knowledge, the more formidable they become, especially in a world where knowledge is becoming commoditized. So that may sound like a contradiction, but it's not. What I'm saying is this. If you look around you now, there's no knowledge you can get almost at the snap of your hand, or in the worst case, with a subscription and then the snap of your hand. And that has been amplified by big data, that has been amplified by artificial intelligence, that has been amplified by collective intelligence. And so these understanding, or these zeitgeist, as it were, these elements of the zeitgeist, as it were, should inform every business owner, should inform every CEO, should inform every aspiring CEO on how they must position in the world that we're heading into. You see, many things around budgeting, many things around investing, many things around funding that make up the general consensus of what people are talking about today. They would have worked if you did them before 2020. In fact, they would have worked if you did them before 2022. But the rate of change that is going on in the world is at a level unprecedented. So much so that even the people supposedly at the helm of affairs are confounded most times by the rate of change. The world is changing very quickly. And so to knowledge we must turn, to understanding we must turn, but not just to any random knowledge, not just to any random understanding. We must turn to clarity. And by clarity, what I mean is this: we exist in a social climate, we exist in a personal climate, if you will, as well. And if you do not understand those climates, you cannot, I mean, you technically can thrive in them, but that'll be you relying on luck as opposed to you having a strategy. So the first thing you must do is understand, where am I? You know, it's like this thing where you see in movies. If you've watched any movies, I think I've watched like two or three of a couple of movies where the main character wakes up in a body. They cannot identify themselves. They don't know how they got themselves there, right? It's like the person had some form of amnesia. The first thing they need to do, or they often tend to do, is, where am I? And then if they come across a mirror, they reflect and say, who am I? And I think it's intentional. And I think that's the same place, that's the we should um, tackle the problem of starting a business or continuing a business or making it thrive. You start by saying, okay, where am I? And where am I looks like many things. It looks like, what country am I in? Obviously, you know the country you are, but then that translates into further questions like, so what's the regulatory framework around the country I live in? What is the social climate like? What's the political climate like? There are certain businesses that cannot thrive in certain political climates. The economic climate is there, the social climate is there, but the political climate just doesn't make sense. I'll give you an example. The idea of personal security outfits cannot thrive in a country where citizens cannot carry guns, right? Because what's the point of a personal security if they cannot carry guns? Like it's pretty much not effective, or not as effective as it would be in a country like America, as an example, where in some states the civilians are allowed to carry guns. And so understanding that is one step. The understanding of the social climate as well. What are people's struggle right now? You know, as an example, insecurity is plaguing Nigeria a lot, and people are complaining a lot. That is a fertile ground, unfortunately, right, for businesses, for entrepreneurs to come and try to solve the problems. Now, in trying to solve the problem, they have to solve the problem within the regulatory framework of the country, within the political framework of the country, within the social framework of the country. But that's the point of being an entrepreneur. That's the point of starting an enterprise, which is to solve problems. Now, to speak to what Mr. Mayowa said, which is some people want lifestyle businesses. Yes, so that comes to the second point I'm talking about. So after you gain clarity of where you are, right, um, you're now going to look for a mirror that is saying, who am I? Now you understand where you are, you understand what is going on in your in your environment, in the lives of people around you. The question then becomes, who am I? Who am I answers the question philosophically, but also aims to give you the best leverage in terms of the business you can start. If you understand yourself to be someone who is not very detail oriented, who is not very process driven, then you understand the type of businesses that you cannot do, or at least that you cannot do alone. So, who am I is more than you know, the trite or the overused narrative of, oh, to find who you are. Well, yes, you have to, but it actually depends on it becomes a critical philosophical lifeblood for your business. Because if you're able to understand who you are, you then know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, you know what type of business makes sense. As an example, someone like me, I can never do a business where I have to buy and sell like constantly. Like I cannot just do it. It doesn't make any sense for me, right? So if I see the opportunity, I'm either going to partner with someone to do that, or I would get someone else to do it instead, and I'll just step out of it. So having that understanding becomes a competitive advantage. Why? Because many people without that
You need to
understanding
start
of,
rounding up, Mr. Damilari.
okay, cool, I'll do that. Many people without that understanding of where they are and who they are, they're unable to pull the highest or the strongest levers that they can pull. And so the last idea that I'll be sharing on that is partnerships and collaborations, which makes perfect sense, right? So you now know where you are, you know who you are and how you're going to interact in where you are. Then for the places where there are insufficiencies and there are shortcomings, then you partnership. So in the example I gave, if you are the business partner who doesn't like to go through processes and all of that, you can work with this is Doing's company, right, which is ARC. And what they do there is they work with data. So they are able to help you solve data problems. You can hand that problem over to them, right? That's a form of collaboration. It's a form of partnership. Or you can bring someone on board, like a human resource, right, who is able to do that for you. And that way, you're able to outsource your weaknesses and still get the advantage of someone else doing them for you. So with those three things, I think SMEs are positioned to inevitably win. Oh, one more thing I forgot to add is the idea of research. Research continues to be something that many people overlook. And it's quite unfortunate because all of the ideas, like all the first mover advantages, they accrue to the person who is able to spot the future before the future comes. And so Reed becomes the um, undefeated heavyweight champion when it comes to giving you the advantage that other people cannot see yet. There's going to be a business model that is going to thrive in 2028. This is 2026. Who is going to see it? Well, you can stumble into it by luck or by accident, or you can start researching right now from all the information we have now. What is 2028 going to look like? What is 2030 going to look like? And then you can position yourself for that future, position your business for that future. You can decide today, you can budget today, you can invest today, you can look for funding that is aligned with that future so that you're not constantly aligned with the energy of the past. And if you're unable to do that research, just like I mentioned, you can then partner with people, organizations, and associations to get that done for you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Mr. Damilari. Thank you so much, Mr. Damilari. I think one of the problem SMEs has is everybody just wants to go into business. They don't really know who they are and what they are. They don't know the business that works for them. They just see that this business is making profits. I want to go into this business. Thank you so much for shedding more light on that. So we're going to go to our last speaker for the day. Mr. Fundayo, the floor is yours for 10 minutes, please.
Okay. Thank you for having me on the call. This is pretty interesting. I've had all the who will speak on this topic, and I'm wondering what exactly am I supposed to say now, because it seems I'm going to learn at the end of the day, my ability to look in flawed, but let's just my two cover. So over the years, run businesses, worked some worked out, some failed. Now we now sit on different kind of businesses, and I would disagree with some of the things that have been said before. I don't speak philosophy. I speak the things that worked, and privilege sit on boards of organizations, and I've seen numbers for some cases. And some of the things I would primarily come to address is the fact that 90% of the businesses I've seen did not start with a plan or a vision. So the first thing, as I said, that people start as a lifestyle business most times, except maybe people who are doing maybe their second startups, or maybe they've had certain level of exposure before they start their business. But most of the businesses you will come across all started as somebody who just want to make ends meet. Then they grow to become that very standard business, as it were. Now, if you come to speak to them and you say, oh, you need this, you need that to be able to do X, Y, Z, you're just talking about their head sometimes. So the journey will be that how do we grow you from where you are to where you want to be? How much funding do you want to have in your business? How do you grow? Some businesses don't actually need money, as I used to say, because money kills some of the businesses. Too much money, even money typically don't help some people to become creative, especially around the ideas and businesses, because we've seen all kind of funds in the market. I give you a quick story. So when we started a small lending company some years ago. We were doing a lot of micro lending. And when I mean micro lending, we're lending people things like we're lending people things like 5K, 10K kind of lending. And later we grew, we started lending people 100K. We had all our controls. There were no softwares really for us because we didn't even have money to afford it. But that grew over time, and we started looking at other people's money. So our cost of funds were becoming high. We did all kind of dimension where we partnered with bigger microfinance banks. We lent to people, we put our own markup, we did all of those kind of things around money. Later, we did something that was a bit interesting, but later backfired on us. We got somebody who gave us 100 million then, and the cost of fund was pretty interesting. But what we never remembered or took into cognizance was from the day the money lands into your account, the interest was already reading from that day. So, we were looking for who would take money from us. By that was the first month, it was clear to us that we're going to owe this guy money. So we had to go and renegotiate. And many other things that happened. Then we looked at the bad loans and all of that in that process. But that's the lending side of the things I did. That same business at scale today, have licenses, acquired some other things, went into property under that same scheme. And under that same process, we've been able to, own hotels and all of that, have about 40 something Airbnb. So by the time you look at the lending processes involved in some of the conversation, it goes just beyond the books. Relationship is one of the biggest things that will help you with any form of lending, financing for your business. And when I mean relationships, some businesses, so for example, we got into this particular business in one of my organization where we were to provide a particular service, and the organization is going to pay us after 60 days of execution. Now, these are fantastic deals, talking of about 800 million or more somewhere. But the issue will be that, do I go and borrow money to run this gig and all of that? By the time you make a proper case, such organizations will sometimes say, okay, we can give you 50% upfront, seeing the size of what you're going to be incurring, your lending cost and your cost of funds, and looking at the profitability of the business such that you're able to deal with certain things faster. So sometimes when we discuss funding can be relationships. It can be the person who will take you through the door. The assets you see can be the people involved in the business with you. I've had one of my staff took us to some kind of meetings where we naturally would not be able to enter those places, but his uncle or our uncle somewhere got us into that room. Why? Why I'm saying this is because most times we speak all the English, you have all the documentation. We have a real estate company. We sign MREF and all of that for people's, gotten people to get the federal government loan. But we've also realized that even the commercial banks, with all your papers, may not even approve you for the money you're looking for. You have all the data, you have all your tax fixed, you have the CFO, you have everything, and then they're still looking at you and no response. We'll get back to you, get back to you. Well, somebody who has just barely a little over it or don't have sufficient will still get the same gig. So I'm saying this, that there are some level of insights that just goes beyond this. And this is not only the context of Nigeria. I did real estate in the US. And we talk about private money, private lending. I did flips. I bought homes. I flipped them in the US. Some titles and all of that. Some lawyers will tell you how to do your wraparound mortgage. At a point, I didn't even have the papers to do the full-time real estate thing. And when I mean full papers, means that I need some credit. I need my credit score must be this number, this must be that. And they're able to use other people's documentation to get homes from here, and then we do wrap, and then we sell. And I've been through those spectrum. So relationship is one of the most fundamental thing in funding. Now, the other thing is you also want to ask yourself, how big do you want to grow? I remember there was a startup we sold. We started the biggest email marketing platform at the time in Nigeria. And even BusinessDay were using us. A couple of organizations, MSBM, TechPoint, everybody got on our mailing platform at that time. And we finally wrapped up that business and we sold it to a university in the UK. So I'm saying that funding does not necessarily um, come through the ways we always think about it in the books or in the papers or how we think it should be. But sometimes it may just be those relationships. Now, what gave us distribution? What gave us
You need to
funding?
start rounding up, Mr. Ekundayo.
So what gave us funding? What gave us push? And how did we get a lot of bucks into our system? Well, the networks and the partnerships. Somebody had mentioned partnerships that we had for that kind of funding. But I think I will wrap up with those 2 points. I would stop there and thank you for having me on the call.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ekundayo. It was nice to hear your own parts. So right now, just be rushing through some questions because we're running out of time. We're just going to be rushing into the questions and we're going to be asking different questions. So this particular question is for you, Mr. Eitayo. So you talked about budgeting, funding, and investing. Mr. Eitayo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you well.
Okay. You talked about funding, budgeting, and investing. And I know for a fact that I've seen you start up different companies. So I want to ask, and I want you to just tell us from the realistic view, like not just from because you've been there, you've gone through it, and you are now where you are today. So SMEs want to know what financial mistake did you make, or did you not make any financial mistake? And how can these financial mistakes be avoided? And also, you talked about differentiating yourself from the business money. We all know that we're in a country whereby things are not really going on very well. And, so how do they stay away from their business money? What rules? How have you survived your startup companies that you're where you are today? So please, SMEs would like to know that.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much, Esther. Let me start with the last part. How did I survive, up until today? There is no how you will pay your dues. It's the bloodiest game you're ever going to get into. The game is how to kill you. If you're not ready to die as an entrepreneur, don't do this thing. Go get a 9 to 5. We are talking about you building something that will create jobs for hundreds and thousands of people, and there's no escape. It's hard. Now, the second part is in the Nigerian economy, how do you survive? You just have to separate yourself. What I did was to have accountability partners. I had to have accountability partners. The first thing I did was to first create a board of people to advise me. I had like 4 people in my life that I was very, very responsible to. Then I moved them from just advising me to sending them the financial report of my business every month. In fact, another thing I did was to add one of them to the back end of my operations account. And these are not directors, because I was still very small. I didn't have board of directors. I didn't have anything then. I was just a one-man mopo that was building a business myself. But I was very intentional about asking for help. Just first person I brought in was one of my friends, Ibrahim. And I told Ibrahim then, I think this was like 2018 or so. And I told Ibrahim, bro, I don't dey touch this business money thing, what I need help. I will send you every week my financial statement and financial report downloaded from my bank account so that you can just help me ensure that I'm not touching this money of the business. Now, so because you have to create a system that takes you away from that business. In the words of the greatest philosopher, that ever lived, President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, if you put the goat and the yam together, the goat will eat the yam. It's simple. Don't try to be very close to the yam if you're a goat. So what I did was to separate myself a whole lot by blocking it. And one of the best ways to block it is you can have a token that allows you to approve and not to initiate transaction in your operations account. You can have a board of people that support you, but as you grow, you then have to start to create a system that takes you away. So for example, have external auditors that audit your account. Have your accountant ensure that at the beginning of the month, there is a budgeting system. Then one thing I wanted to talk about that you also mentioned was, you see, when it comes to accessing funding, right? When it comes to accessing funding, I think for me, it started with just changing the way I think. I started changing because I wasn't brought up like some other people that had very rich and successful parents. So they learned wealth. Like we learned poverty. Like growing up for me, the lesson was like poverty. So for example, some of the lessons that I learned was like, hey, don't take loan. And all those very nasty mindset were the things I grew up with. So I had to rewire myself. Please, as an entrepreneur, go and say, there's no way you can build this thing with your own money. You can't build a business with your money. It's impossible. It's not possible. You can't be taking money that the business creates and then you're using that same money to build the business. You're killing it. You're stressing that business. You have to learn to rely on external funds. So all this mindset that we were taught, if you take loan from the bank, I grew up knowing that, the bank will take all your house, because those people use their houses as collateral. One of the things that Ekundayo said that I really love is the power of relationship when it comes to accessing funding. In everything you do as an entrepreneur, remember, cash is king. So you want to be closer to people that print this cash. Cash is king. So you must be close to the people that print the cash. Remember, they say something in your business is king. So you must be, your priority must be to be closer to the people that print that king. So the bankers must be your friend. In fact, this morning, I still built a relationship with a microfinance bank. I was just, talking to the guy. We're just talking, because at the end of the day, I know that running a business means in the next 1 year, I might not have cash around me. I probably would have over-invested everything. Who are the top 3, 4 people that you're going to put a call through to, and they will pump you with another cash? So relationship is very important. And I learned that the hard way because I was very operational. I would wake up in the morning and go to my office in the morning phase 2. But you know what my friends were doing? They would wake up in the morning and they would go to the head office of the bank. I was very operational. My hands were very, in the running of the business day to day until I think it was 2022 when I met one of my very successful entrepreneurs, at Sterling Bank. And I was like, oh, bro, we're coming to come and teach Sterling Bank. I was coming to come and train the bank. He was coming to come and build the relationship with the bank for future credits. You see the difference between the two entrepreneurs. The one entrepreneur is very operational. Let's do the work. The other one is very relationship driven. I want to go meet the people that will help me in the future when I need it. So if you really want to get out of that bracket or that bucket, that one of the things you want to do is to just begin to change your mindset. And what I did was to watch successful people. I realized that people like the Otedolas, the Dangotes, they're very comfortable with debt. They talk about it as though it's a casual thing, But I'm here praying that I don't run into it. You see the different mindset, right? I'm here praying to Almighty God that I don't run into what billionaires casually talk about as though it is. So you have to just change that mindset and get into the mindset that think like them. And one of that mindset for me is cash is king. So you always have to be closer to the people that print money. That is the way to run a company. Your goal is I want to be closer to them so that when I need to invest, when I need to diversify, when I need to do things, I'm able to get them. Let me drop this with you. And I think one of my mentors told me that some years back. If an idea comes to your mind right now, if you see a big, massive opportunity right now, and you need another 100 million to pump into it, are you close to the people that actually have the cash?
Most of us are close to people that will do the job. We are close to, oh, I can call another. If I want to hire some brilliant guy now, I will call Esther and say, Esther, please come and join my company now. That is what we know how to do as entrepreneurs. We don't know how to call the people that have the cash to say, hey, Doni, please, I'm looking for 20 million. Oh, I see this big opportunity. Well, because Doni sits on a lot of cash, she's able to pump it to me because we've built relationship over the years. And she trusts that when it comes to running a startup, I know how to do this thing. I wanted to mention someone's name, but I will not because this video is recorded. If you want to study a great entrepreneur in the tech ecosystem, I will mention his name, in the tech ecosystem, go study the founder of Miva University, Sim Sagaya. This guy can start a business today and raise money tomorrow. And you'll be shocked how he does it because Sim spent 90% of his time sitting with people that print money. He sits with them. And I know this for a fact because he can just put a call through to someone right now and say, hey, I want you to meet this investor. It's such a casual relationship with him. But I spent all my life building businesses and not building relationships. And that's why people like myself struggle to access financing. So that is what we need to do.
Thank you so much, Mr. Itayo. I really learned from it. So it's not just about the operational aspect. You have to build relationship with people that have this money so that you can go forward. Thank you so much, Mr. Itayo. So I'm going to come to you, Doyin. You talked about data. I'm going to ask you, we know that we're in a data-driven economy. Everything now is operational on data. So I want you to tell us, how can SMEs use this data effectively to improve their budgeting, to secure funding, and also make smarter investment decisions? And what are the affordable data tools that this SME can use? What do you recommend for these SMEs to use to improve their budgeting and financial planning?
Yes, okay. Thank you for that. I think it's very important. I've been paying attention, obviously, to the rest of the conversation. I think that the two things are quite important. You need to run your business well. You need to pay attention to operations, and you also need to pay attention to the relationship side of things. I totally agree with what the other panelists have been saying. But I think the difficulty with SMEs is that they tend to feel that you need to prioritize one beyond the other. It's a balancing act. Now, when we speak about data, we know that data in and of itself cannot really get you into the rooms, right? But it provides you with more confidence and it provides you with more credibility. When we talk about building relationships, yes, I mean, as we all know, there are people in this environment who hold the keys to quite a lot of capital. If you invest in those relationships and you trust and you build trust, then it broadens the scope for what you will have access to. But in my personal experience, for example, as I said, I've been an entrepreneur now in Nigeria for about 17 years. Yeah, 17 years since 2009. And ARC is just one of the companies that I actually run. So I've lived this and I've seen this. Yes, relationships are critical, but it gets to a point where you can't only leverage on just your relationships. You need to build credibility as well. Now, that's where that data aspect comes into play. If you were able to get a door to be open for you based off of somebody else's relationship, that means that you're trading off of that person's credibility. And at some point, it will come to bear, you would need to produce the results. How do you produce the results? It's not only by saying this or doing huge marketing campaigns. It gets to a particular point in your growth journey whereby you do need to prove your credibility. And one of the things that, as we've all heard, you can argue with a lot of things, but it's hard to argue with numbers, right? So yes, numbers in and of themselves don't solve all the problems, but it's good to start building them as early as possible. I do understand that early on in the journey, it can be a bit chaotic. There's so many things to kind of pay attention to. But as soon as possible, once you start building a track record, a credible, verifiable track record, that's somebody else that wasn't there with you. Because at the end of the day, as we kept saying, relationship building is important, but you're going to build relationships across your whole journey. When you first start, when you've been in business for 5 years, when you've been in business for 10 years. But at that point, if somebody hasn't been around with you, hasn't been there for the journey, it's useful when you're able to recall in a way that is very viable and credible. Now, to your question about what the options that are there, I mean, I actually have a business ARC. It's storeadarc.com. Our starter package is 15,000 naira a month, which equates to about 500 naira per day. In Nigeria, we know how expensive things are. We've made this product accessible because we understand how critical it is for the businesses to grow. This is a scale product, so we're not trying to make all the money off of 1 or 2 or 100 customers. But we've seen that as we've been onboarding SMEs and working with nonprofit organizations, even financial institutions as well, it's something that is quite critical because, as we say, in this environment, we've taught and taught and trained and trained. There's an endless barrage of workshops and lectures. And the truth is, even the average SME, whether you're running a lifestyle business, whether you're running a business just to show off, whether you're running a business to scale, at the end of the day, for whatever the objective is, you want to do vis-a-vis whatever it is your goals are. Now, you've been schooled and you've been taught about what best practices are. You need structure. You need to have procedures. You need to have processes. We've also spoken about accountability. They understand all of these things in theory, but what has consistently been lacking in this environment are the practical tools to be able to implement these things. Because theory, as you know, as some of my other co-panelists have said, is different from practice. So the reality now is, what are those tools? Very useful question. We have one of them. As I said, it's store@arc.com. The starter package is quite accessible. It gives you access to 3 people, but you can run everything as it pertains to managing your operations, all the way from procurement to sales, even from the accounting side of it as well. Your rent, your utilities, your marketing, you're able to keep track of all these figures. And when we speak about collaborating with other professionals, what are you going to use to collaborate with them? You can have a call, you can introduce them to your business, but even when you're not at the point where you can hire a lawyer full-time, or you can hire to have an accountant full-time, even if you are only able to use them fractionally, it's always useful when you have relevant information to share with them, so that for those periods where they're not actively involved with your business, they are not operating blindly. And that's one of the things that we've found as well, because obviously a lot of small and medium enterprises feel that accountants can be quite expensive. That could be the case, but if you have the relevant types of information and the data points that your accountants need, it makes things a lot more straightforward. It makes it easier for them, and it reduces the cost to you. Even from a legal perspective, you have a partner that you've been trading with, and you have your terms that you had already hashed out with them previously. Now, one of the things that this helps you to do is that you can share a lot of all that information with your lawyer, so that they're actually able to ground whatever it is, the conversations they're having with the counterparty, based on actual facts, right? So that's basically the perspective that I think is quite important. You want to run a business properly. From an operational standpoint, you want to run it as well as possible. You also want to build relationships, but please, we need to remember that it's not, no man will only get you so far. At some point, people are not going to keep on trading on their credibility if you're not proving that it's worth their while. So that's where the trust building comes in as well. And I know we've also had a conversation about trust, but we need to be able to understand that at the same time as you're building relationships, you need to make sure that you're able to strengthen those relationships. How do you do that? You provide credible types of evidence to your counterparties, even to the general market as well, that you're a serious concern and you're trustworthy. And you don't say that by saying, trust me, trust me, trust me. No, you prove it by having access to your data, credibility, and you start building that within the marketplace. And what you will find is that some of those relationships that you might have been chasing will then start to chase after you as well.
Thank you so much, Doyin. Thank you so much. So I'm going to ask Mr. Ekundayo. So you talked about funding. What are the funding options available for SMEs besides bank loan? Is there any other funding options that SMEs should be aware of? Because if I don't want to collect a bank loan, what other funding options is available to SMEs? Please, in 3 minutes, please. Because we're trying to round up fast.
Thank you for having me back. So a few funding opportunities. First, some people have a degree of into assets. So if we will take a popular story, Dangote, whose uncle gave him some money to start up. So that's an option. So there are many people who grew up into assets. So funding in itself may not necessarily be cash. So for example, you have a leverage, you're starting a business, you have office and all of that already sorted. That could be funding. Another thing is, this sounds very tricky, but a good name. So you're coming from from a name you can inherit. Maybe you guys have a legacy or something. Usually, if you walk through the doors, funding easily comes out for you. I've seen that happen, not once, not twice. There's a company we consult for on a particular floor. The who is who, everybody seated there. And I was asking the CEO one day, said, look, anytime somebody comes here and they hear names with, I just say Adeogun, they hear all those things, I saw name here, they feel there's something going on here. So that's another one. The other one could be friends and family, which is a typical local thing that you can raise from there. Then the next one would then be VC funds and all of that. That's you can be very careful of, and you can also still because everybody raises every day in Nigeria. It's fantastic. I see them. Some have exited, some have died, some bought banks out of the money they raised from VCs. Then we then have the other forms of funding, which will be that the where you begin to go to the regular sharks. So in one of the real estate company we wanted to invest in at the time, we noticed that they were taking loans from sharks. They're doing as much as 12% per month, not just even per annum. So in 6 months, the guy was paying 60% of the same money he borrowed. And it was pretty interesting. So you can go and raise money from the sharks and all of that. Other ways would then be if you want to raise money from within some sort of contributory funds. There's a lady who started a water business from existing savings, but the pension funds that she saved, she still works, and I think there's a way they go behind to get their pensions and all of that. They give her a good chunk of it, and she's running in Magboro now. I think the business is growing fast. I've not had time to look at it over the past 1 year. Then there are some sort of credit you can get, especially when you do supply businesses. So when we were doing laptop supplies, purchase, all those IT infrastructure support, we used to get this credit forward where the supplier gives us a bit of credit. Instead, if we pay for 10 laptops, we can get about 20, 30 laptops sometimes, and then we do trade and then we do transactions and we pay them back their money. So, so there are different kind of places or things you can play around funds and how you get that. If you're in product business, if you can play around your raw materials and all of that, you can get a bit of instrument, a bit of a paid forward kind of funding. So if you look at, especially the people in car dealerships, phones, all of those electronics and all of that, they do a lot of that where they get paid forward. And then if you're dealing with FMCGs in Nigeria, they use similar models sometimes. So I think one of the cement companies currently would stand as your BG, as your bank guarantor sometimes to help you so that if you want to buy 400 million worth of cement from them a month, they'll be the one to stand for you in the bank as your guarantor, knowing that they're the ones supplying, doing all of that. So they're a couple of mix to different kind of funds depending on the kind of business. But one business that really does not need funds most times is usually business, a business that requires thinking. You're actually the funds and the quality of consultant or who you are in the business usually determine the level of funds you can access. That has a whole spectrum to deal with. And then the kind of contracts you go into would also determine what you do. Sometimes you see people go into invoice discounting and all of that. That's how they get their money forward and all of that. So there are many ways you can play around funds, not specifically just going to the bank or
Thank you so much.
going to lateralize loan. So that's my two kobo.
Thank you so much,
Thanks.
Mr. Ekundayo. Thank you so much. So this question now will be for Mr. Mayowa. Mr. Mayowa, my questions will be, what strategies can SMEs use to attract investors in a highly competitive market based on what you do, based on your company? What are the strategies SMEs can use to attract these investors in a highly competitive market?
Yeah, okay. So I think the narrative that has been basically said on this panel, which I completely endorse, is a level of credibility, building trust and relationships, right? So a strategy that I would advise an SME to use is that first of all, they need to understand that investors, especially institutional investors, are quite a risk avoidance. They don't like risk. right? And I think most SMEs make the mistake of putting an ROI in front of an investor and say, oh, you can make 50% or 10x your money over the period of investment. But that's not necessarily speaking to the value and the aspect that the institutional capital is looking to hear from you, right? So a strategy would be understanding, first of all, put yourself in their shoes, right? If you're speaking to an institutional investor, and you're the one that's going to make a decision whether to invest or not, you also don't want to be that person that makes an investment that cannot be defended in a larger conversation down the road, right? So as an SME, a strategy would be put yourself in the investor's shoes, give them the evidence, the structure that can defend the investment down the road, so that way, even if the investment goes left, they could still say at any point in time that it was made under the right circumstances with the right information, and they can still defend it at that time. So don't only speak about when things go well, think about when things don't go well, because that's how a lot of institutional investors are thinking. They're not necessarily looking at your ROI. They're not looking at their multiples. They are looking at, okay, what happens if this doesn't go well? How do we explain this to our board of directors, or how do we explain this to our stakeholders? So giving them confidence um, by providing the structure, and providing them the governance framework that, okay, this is what happens in this event, this is what happens in that event. That means you have to think 5 steps ahead in your business, and plan for things that are yet to come, and explain what will happen in those circumstances, and put processes and structures in place to facilitate those things and those decisions. And that is essentially what we call a strategy, right? A strategy is planning for the long term, making decisions in the long term right now, right? Even if things are not totally clear, you're still planning in advance for making decisions. And if you're keeping in context what the investor needs to be able to defend their decision down the road, then that is a strategy that you can, you can take advantage of and be different from all the other SMEs that are trying to raise money based on, oh, come and give me money, I'll give you, 10x your money. Making a good return is excellent. People like money, but that's not what's going to move the needle most of the times for a lot of investors. They want to know that the money they give you is protected, and that they have a good chance of getting it back.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayowa. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayowa. So my question will be to Mr. Damilare. Mr. Damilare, can you hear me? Mr. Damilare? Mr. Damilare? Oh, I think he's gone off. So I think he's gone off. So the last question, this will be a last question for everyone, and everybody should just tell me their take, and it will be looking ahead. What financial threats should SMEs prepare for to remain competitive and stable? Anybody can start. Mr. Mayowa, you can start. So
Yes, sorry, please. Can you repeat the question? What?
the question is looking ahead. What financial threats should SMEs prepare for to remain competitive and sustainable to ensure that they have a long-term growth and sustainability?
Yeah, okay. So I think one thing that people can take advantage of that is actually readily available, there are a lot of grants that are available, right? And grants are essentially free money. They come with some conditions, but it's not necessarily money that has to be paid back, right? So even when you're starting an SME, you should think, how can I position this SME to be able to be open to receiving grants? Because that's one of the easiest ways to fund your business is through a grant.
Also, thank you.
Yeah, I
And
think
also just give a parting words to SMEs, what you want them to do and to keep their
yeah,
business growing.
yeah. So I think SMEs are very important for the economy. I give ultimate respect to all SMEs who have endeavored to start and who are adding value within their communities and to the country at large. I would also say, as an SME, try and think in intervals of 5 years, right? Don't be dissuaded if things are not necessarily going your way right now. You need to be able to survive. And I think another panelist mentioned that cash is king. So you need to be able to think about how can you retain enough cash to be able to keep the business alive. That is the ultimate goal of a founder, is to keep the business alive, keep the cash coming in so that way you can fund the business. And think of intervals of 5 years because a lot can happen within 5 years. So if you're not ready to think long term, then you should also try to consider alternatives, because SMEs, you have to think long term. You have to be able to be able to survive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayowa. So, Ms. Doyin, I think Ms. Doyin, are you still here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
All right. So
Yes,
over to
okay.
you and your parting words to
Yes,
SMEs
so
too.
yes, I heard your question about threats.
Okay.
I think one of the things about entrepreneurs is we have a capacity to look at the opportunities where the vast majority of other people would see the threats. I think that's also very, very important. For example, if we're going to look at technology, there's a lot of feeling about what's going to happen to us in the age of artificial intelligence. I do think that there are huge opportunities for small and medium enterprises there, because with a smaller team, you could actually do a lot more. Roles and job functions that were quite specialized, that you would have required professionals with years of experience, you have access to that type of knowledge now because of the advancements. So generally, we know that this can be a challenging type of environment to operate in, but there are always opportunities within those threats. So whoever is able to think through and basically look for what those opportunities are, those are usually the winners. Parting words, it's very important as a business for you to be aware of your competitive advantage. I know some of my panelists spoke about knowledge and having a clear view and having an understanding of the environment in which you are operating and even your own business. Having a clear understanding of your environment and your business, nobody should know your business more than you. That's where your competitive advantage lies, because there will be advantages that you have that the identical business next door does not have. It could have to do with human resources. It could have to do with advantages like we've spoken about here with relationships. It could have to do with previous experience. I know one of my other panelists spoke about having worked in America in the real estate field in America. I'm sure he used some of that knowledge when he came back. But always keeping your eye on what is my competitive advantage and how am I able to present that credibly within the market is something that I find has been very useful for me, in my entrepreneurial journey. And I believe that more small and medium enterprises should exploit that.
Thank you so much, Doyin. Thank you so much to all our esteemed speakers. I think the other speakers have to run along. Thank you very much. It was an insightful session today. I am sure all the SMEs have really, really learned a lot. And on behalf of Business Day, we want to say thank you to you all and have a very wonderful day. Bye, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Bye. Thank you.